Imagine a young prince, just 17, stepping onto the throne of one of the most powerful kingdoms in Europe, England, in the year 1509. His name was Henry VIII, and if you think modern royalty has drama, you clearly haven't met this guy. Henry VIII, the Tudor king, wasn't just your average monarch who waved a scepter and looked regal in portraits. No, he was bigger, louder, hungrier for power, and, let's be honest, hungrier for food. And it all started when he became king after the death of his father, Henry VII, the founder of the Tudor dynasty, a man who had spent decades painstakingly stitching together the torn fabric of England after the bloody Wars of the Roses. Henry VIII inherited not only the throne, but also an expectation to maintain the stability of the realm while expanding its glory. And boy, did he take that job seriously, albeit in a very Henry VIII way. From the very start, Henry VIII made it clear that he would not be a passive ruler. He loved tournaments, jousting, and every activity that let him demonstrate physical prowess. Unlike his father, who was cautious and calculating, Henry VIII's approach to ruling was bold, flamboyant, and occasionally terrifying. He combined charm with an almost frightening intensity. Everyone in the court quickly learned that this Tudor king had opinions, and when he expressed them, you'd better pay attention. But before we get too deep into his marriages, religious reforms, and political machinations, we have to start at the beginning, because the life of Henry VIII is a story that combines romance, war, religion, and scandal into one wild Tudor cocktail that would make even modern viewers gasp. Henry VIII's early life was a mix of privilege and expectation. Born in 1491, he was the second son of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York, but his older brother, Arthur, was initially destined for the throne. Arthur's untimely death in 1502 made Henry the heir apparent, and suddenly, everything changed. He was no longer just the fun-loving young prince who could joust, hunt, and sing. He became the future king, the man who would determine the course of England. And while many young princes might have buckled under the weight of such responsibility, Henry VIII seemed to relish it. He trained in languages, theology, law, and, importantly, diplomacy. After all, a Tudor king needed to know how to charm, manipulate, and sometimes terrify both allies and rivals. But here's the thing about Henry VIII. He was not just a student of serious matters. He also had a taste for extravagance. Historical records, sometimes exaggerated, always colorful, tell us that young Henry loved music, hunting dogs, and of course, feasts that could put modern competitive eating contests to shame. Imagine a king who could eat an entire swan in one sitting or demand that hundreds of courses be served at a single banquet. That is Henry VIII, a man whose appetite for life and food was almost as legendary as his political ambitions. His love for extravagance also extended to clothing and fashion. He adored finery, silks, and jewels, and he made sure that anyone who attended court knew it. Tudor England, under the early reign of Henry VIII, was a place where opulence was not just admired, it was required. But Henry VIII was more than just a lover of feasts and tournaments. He was a man with a plan, albeit a plan often marked by impulsive decisions and shocking changes in direction. When he became king, he initially positioned himself as a Renaissance prince, intelligent, cultured, and ambitious. He was also extremely aware of his image. Henry VIII wanted to be seen as a strong and competent ruler, a monarch who could rival the kings of France and the Holy Roman Empire. To that end, he invested heavily in the navy, commissioned lavish palaces, and sought alliances through marriage, something that would become a recurring theme in his life. Speaking of marriage, even in these early years, Henry VIII had a fascination with women that would define much of his reign. He fell in love quickly, passionately, and often imprudently. His first major courtship as king was with Catherine of Aragon, the widow of his late brother Arthur. Political considerations made this a sensible match, It reinforced the alliance between England and Spain, a powerful European kingdom. But Henry VIII was not a man who did anything halfway. He pursued Catherine with energy and charm, determined to make this union both politically advantageous and personally satisfying. And while Catherine of Aragon was a formidable woman, intelligent, dignified, and deeply religious, Henry's later years would reveal that his desires often overrode prudence, a trait that would come back to haunt the Tudor dynasty in ways no one could predict. Early in his reign, Henry VIII also demonstrated his political ambition through his foreign policy. He wanted to assert England as a major player in Europe, a kingdom that could not be ignored. That meant wars, alliances, and sometimes embarrassing failures that still made his court thrillingly dramatic. He was eager to prove himself as a warrior king, not just a king in name. Campaigns in France, often costly and only partially successful, were as much about demonstrating his personal courage as they were about territorial gain. And while historians sometimes criticize these campaigns for being inefficient, they cemented Henry VIII's reputation as a hands-on, if occasionally reckless, ruler. Religion, at this early stage, was another domain where Henry VIII seemed conventional yet would eventually upend everything. As a young king, he was a devout Catholic and even earned the title Defender of the Faith from the Pope for his writings against Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation. Yet, beneath this pious exterior, Henry VIII harbored ambitions and desires that would eventually lead him to break away from the Roman Catholic Church and create the Church of England, a move that would shake Europe to its core. It's tempting to think of this as purely religious, but it was as much about Henry's personal needs, political strategy, and yes, his insatiable desire to marry and Boleyn after failing to secure a male heir with Catherine of Aragon. By the end of his early reign, Henry VIII had already established several hallmarks of his rule. He was energetic, bold, and unpredictable. He loved spectacle, from justs to feasts to court ceremonies. He was intelligent and educated, yet often swayed by passion and vanity. His relationships, both personal and political, were intense and sometimes brutal. And most importantly, he had a growing awareness that he was not just any king. He was Henry VIII, the Tudor king whose life would become legendary, infamous, and endlessly fascinating for historians, students, and casual fans alike. What made Henry VIII such an enduring figure, even at this early stage, was the combination of his human desires and extraordinary power. He could be charming and devastating, cultured and cruel, witty and terrifying, all sometimes in the same day. People loved him, feared him, and gossiped about him, and the court thrived on every whim and decision he made. The young Tudor king had set the stage for a reign that would be defined by 6 marriages, political intrigue, religious upheaval, and a personal life that was as dramatic as any modern soap opera, only with more swords and crowns. Even in these first few years, Henry VIII's story demonstrates why he remains one of the most famous monarchs in English history. His early life, his rise to power, and his personality laid the groundwork for all the monumental decisions and infamous events that would define his reign. From Catherine of Aragon to and Boleyn, from jousting tournaments to battles abroad, from lavish feasts to the looming shadow of political and religious reform, Henry VIII's England was a world full of drama, ambition, and spectacle. And the man at the center of it all, the king himself, was as unforgettable as any character history has ever produced. So, as we close this first glimpse into the life of Henry VIII, remember that this is just the beginning. His early years as a charming, ambitious, and exuberant Tudor prince-turned-king set the stage for the chaos, tragedy, and bizarre humor that would follow. Every decision, every marriage, every feast, and every bold political move would leave an imprint on England that is still felt today. In the next segment, we'll dive headfirst into the whirlwind of Henry VIII's reign, exploring his first marriage, the early political maneuvers, and the shocking choices that would cement him as one of history's most infamous kings. But for now, imagine the courts of England buzzing with excitement, trepidation, and gossip as Henry VIII, the man, the myth, the Tudor king, begins his unforgettable story. As the young Henry VIII settled into his role as king, the first thing on his mind, besides hunting, feasting, and showing off in tournaments, was marriage. Yes, the Tudor king's obsession with love, sex, and dynastic stability was about to collide spectacularly. Henry VIII, already known for his charm and flamboyance, had a very specific goal: a male heir. After all, the Tudor dynasty had survived the Wars of the Roses only because of careful political marriages and cunning maneuvering. And Henry VIII knew that his legacy depended on securing England's throne for a son who would follow in his formidable footsteps. But as history would show, this seemingly straightforward mission would lead to scandal, heartbreak, and a complete religious revolution. Henry's first marriage was to Catherine of Aragon, a union carefully designed to cement the alliance between England and Spain. Catherine, the widow of Henry's older brother Arthur, was politically perfect but personally, well, complicated. She was devout, intelligent, and extremely aware of the precarious balance between duty and desire. For Henry VIII, Catherine represented both a bond with a powerful European kingdom and the hope of producing a male heir to secure the Tudor line. Yet, as the years rolled on, it became painfully clear that Catherine's body would not provide the solution Henry desperately sought. Their marriage produced several children, but only one survived infancy: Mary, the future Mary I of England. And while Mary would one day become queen, in the eyes of Henry VIII, a female heir simply would not do. This need for a son sparked a chain of events that would change England forever. Henry VIII, a man of action and impulse, initially tried diplomatic and religious means to solve the problem. He petitioned the Pope for an annulment of his marriage to Catherine, claiming divine disfavor. After all, the Bible says something about a man not marrying his brother's widow, right? Well, technically, yes, but the Pope wasn't exactly in the mood to anger Spain, one of the most powerful Catholic nations of the time. And so, what began as a personal quest for a son quickly became a national drama, drawing England toward a religious and political crossroads. But before we dive too deep into church politics, it's important to understand Henry VIII's personality during these early years of marriage. The Tudor king was energetic, witty, and charming, able to win hearts in court and abroad with equal ease. He was also impatient, temperamental, and extremely literal-minded when it came to his desires. Catherine of Aragon, as a devout Catholic and politically savvy queen, was patient, disciplined, and loyal, but even her remarkable strength could not prevent the inevitable clash between duty, desire, and ambition. Henry VIII's need for a male heir, combined with his growing fascination with another woman, would set the stage for arguably the most dramatic period of his reign. Enter Anne Boleyn, the woman who would captivate the king and catalyze the greatest religious upheaval in England since the introduction of Christianity itself. Anne was young, intelligent, and ambitious, with a sharp wit that matched Henry VIII's own larger-than-life personality. Unlike Catherine, she was not merely a political ally. She was a challenge, a conquest, and a spark that ignited a passion Henry had never felt before. Anne's allure was not just in her beauty, though she had that in spades, but in her intelligence, her charm, and her refusal to bow entirely to the king's will. She wanted power, influence, and yes, eventually, the crown. The pursuit of Anne Boleyn was not subtle. Henry VIII, previously devoted to Catherine, suddenly became obsessed. The Tudor king courted and with a mixture of grand gestures, political maneuvering, and relentless charm, all while Catherine remained queen, dutifully performing her role as wife and mother. This period, rich in drama and intrigue, illustrates Henry VIII's dual nature, a man capable of genuine affection and intellectual engagement, but also a man whose passions could upend politics, religion, and the very structure of his kingdom. This obsession with Anne, combined with the lack of a male heir from Catherine, eventually forced Henry VIII to take the unprecedented step of challenging the authority of the Pope himself. The resulting conflict led to the English Reformation, one of the most significant religious transformations in European history. Henry VIII broke away from the Roman Catholic Church and established the Church of England, appointing himself as its supreme head. While on the surface this might appear to be a purely religious decision, it was deeply personal. The primary motivator was Henry's desire to marry and Boleyn and secure a male heir. The creation of the Church of England is thus inseparable from the story of Henry VIII's marriages and the political machinations of his court. Meanwhile, Henry VIII's court was a hotbed of intrigue. Advisors, nobles, and clergy were all caught up in the whirlwind of the king's passions and decisions. Some saw opportunity, others saw danger. Alliances shifted as quickly as the king's moods, and the pursuit of a male heir influenced nearly every decision Henry made. This period also highlighted Henry VIII's cunning and ruthlessness. He could charm, persuade, and intimidate with equal skill. People who underestimated him or stood in his way sometimes disappeared from the historical record in ways that remain chilling today. The Tudor king was not merely a man of desire and impulse. He was a political tactician, a manipulator of institutions, and a figure whose personal life and statecraft were deeply entwined. And Boleyn's influence on Henry VIII went beyond personal affection. She inspired him to take radical steps, from religious reform to changes in law, and even to a new conception of monarchy itself. No longer was the king simply a ruler under the spiritual authority of Rome. He was the supreme authority in both religious and political matters in England. This shift would have profound consequences, not just for Henry VIII's own reign, but for centuries of English history to come. Long after his death, historians and scholars would debate the morality, ambition, and genius of a man who could simultaneously be charming, ruthless, and visionary. Of course, the road to marriage with Anne Boleyn was not smooth. It involved years of courtship, political maneuvering, and personal drama that kept England on edge. Advisors, nobles, and foreign dignitaries all had opinions about the king's behavior, but few could influence him. Henry VIII, the Tudor king, was increasingly accustomed to getting what he wanted, whether through charm, coercion, or sheer force of will. This period also demonstrates his obsession with legacy. For Henry, the survival of the Tudor dynasty was paramount, and he was willing to upend centuries of religious and political tradition to secure it. The drama of these years, Catherine's steadfast devotion and ambition, and Henry VIII's impetuous desire for a son, set the stage for the most infamous events of his reign. Every decision, every alliance, every scandal would ripple across Europe, affecting diplomacy, religion, and politics. The young Tudor king's personal life was inseparable from the fate of England, and the resulting tension created a court culture filled with intrigue, gossip, and occasional terror. Advisors had to navigate the shifting sands of Henry's moods, while the population watched a monarch who could be both inspiring and terrifying in equal measure. Even in these early years, the pattern of Henry VIII's reign becomes clear. He was a man driven by desire, legacy, and ambition. He could be brilliant, cruel, loving, and reckless, all within the span of a single court day. The pursuit of a male heir through marriage and the eventual obsession with Anne Boleyn demonstrate not just his personal desires, but his willingness to reshape religion and politics to suit those desires. The creation of the Church of England, a direct result of his marital ambitions, would redefine the nation and leave a lasting legacy on history. Henry VIII's early reign also reminds us that the personal is political. Every romantic decision had political consequences, Every personal choice influenced the nation, and every act of desire or cruelty echoed across Europe. The young Tudor king's life was a masterclass in intertwining personal ambition with statecraft. And while history often remembers him for the scandals, executions, and marriages that followed, it is these early decisions, his first marriage, the obsession with and bullion, the challenge to the Pope, that define the foundation of his reign. So, as we move forward, remember that Henry VIII was not just a king, he was a force of nature. His early years as a married monarch, navigating love, power, and ambition, were just the beginning of a story that would involve 6 wives, political upheaval, religious revolution, and personal drama on a scale that continues to fascinate people today. The Tudor king's pursuit of a male heir, the creation of the Church of England, and the dynamic interplay of passion, ambition, and politics all set the stage for the remarkable, tumultuous, and sometimes terrifying reign of Henry VIII. This is a king who redefined monarchy, reshaped religion, and left a legacy that remains unforgettable. By the time Henry VIII's obsession with and bullion reached its peak, England was on the verge of monumental change, and the Tudor king's reign had entered a phase that historians would later call both brilliant and ruthless. Henry VIII, the Tudor king, had already demonstrated that he was not content to follow tradition blindly. He wanted a male heir, yes, but he also wanted absolute authority, personal satisfaction, and a legacy that would endure through the ages. His court buzzed with tension, gossip, and excitement as the young king navigated the treacherous waters of love, politics, and religion all at once. The stakes were higher than ever because the decisions Henry made in these years would define the very structure of the English monarchy and reshape the country for centuries to come. The central drama of this period was, of course, Henry's desire to marry and bullion. This was no ordinary courtship. Catherine of Aragon, the queen, remained in the palace, steadfast, devout, and politically unmovable, while Henry pursued, and with a mix of charm, coercion, and relentless persistence. It wasn't just a matter of love, it was about power, legacy, and control. The Tudor king knew that a male heir would legitimize his rule and secure the dynasty, and represented that hope. But the Pope, who had long been the spiritual authority over English kings, refused to grant the annulment Henry demanded. This refusal set off a chain of events that would lead Henry VIII to take one of the boldest, most unprecedented actions in English history, breaking from the Roman Catholic Church. Henry VIII's decision to create the Church of England was revolutionary. He appointed himself as supreme head of the church, effectively placing all religious authority under his control. This bold move allowed him to annul his marriage to Catherine and Mary and Bullen, but the consequences went far beyond a single union. England, which had been a devoutly Catholic nation for centuries, was now transformed into a country where the king controlled the church, law, and doctrine. It was a gamble, to say the least, and one that would define Henry VIII's reign. This religious reform, intertwined with his personal ambitions, demonstrates the unique interplay between Henry's private desires and his public authority. The creation of the Church of England was not just a political maneuver. It was a direct result of the king's obsession with his marriages and the urgent need for a male heir, showing just how personal and political decisions were inseparable in Tudor England. Meanwhile, Anne Boleyn's rise at court was dramatic and dangerous. She was not merely a passive participant in this story. She was ambitious, witty, and fully aware of the power she could wield as Henry VIII's future queen. Her intelligence, charm, and occasional defiance made her irresistible to the king and terrifying to her rivals. Courtiers who underestimated her quickly learned that and was not to be trifled with. The rivalry between Anne and Catherine created a tense and volatile atmosphere, with alliances shifting constantly. Advisors had to navigate the king's moods carefully, knowing that favor could be granted or withdrawn in an instant, and that one misstep could lead to disgrace, or worse. As Henry pursued, and he also demonstrated his political acumen. He carefully managed parliament, advisors, and foreign alliances to ensure that his personal goals were supported by the machinery of the state. The king was a master of political strategy, using charm, intimidation, and manipulation to achieve what he wanted. Yet, for all his cunning, he was also driven by very human desires: love, lust, ambition, and obsession. This combination of personal intensity and political skill is what makes Henry VIII such a fascinating historical figure. He was capable of extraordinary brilliance and terrifying ruthlessness, sometimes within the same conversation or decree. By 1533, Henry VIII had achieved his goal. He married Anne Boleyn, and she became Queen of England. The union was celebrated in some quarters and reviled in others, reflecting the deep divisions that had arisen over the king's break with Rome. Anne's coronation was both a triumph and a symbol of the seismic changes Henry had brought to the country. The Tudor king had not only altered the religious landscape, but also demonstrated that his personal desires could directly reshape the kingdom. This period illustrates the inseparability of Henry VIII's personal ambitions from his political and religious decisions, a theme that would continue throughout his reign. However, Henry VIII's pursuit of a male heir remained fraught with challenges. Anne Boleyn gave birth to Elizabeth, the future Elizabeth I, in 1533, but the king was disappointed once again. He craved a son to secure the Tudor dynasty and legitimize his rule. This disappointment set the stage for further scandal and political intrigue. Henry's impatience and intensity led him to make ruthless decisions, including the eventual execution of Anne Boleyn on charges that remain controversial and debated by historians to this day. The Tudor king's reign demonstrates how personal desires, particularly the quest for a male heir, could drive political action and reshape the course of history. Henry VIII's court, meanwhile, was a complex web of power, ambition, and danger. Advisors and nobles constantly maneuvered to stay in the king's favor, while those who fell out of favor often disappeared from history entirely. The Tudor king's combination of charm and ruthlessness ensured that his reign was both engaging and terrifying. The pursuit of Anne Boleyn illustrates how personal relationships could dictate policy, religion, and governance. The king's obsession with securing a male heir transformed England, leading to religious reform, legal innovation, and profound social change. During this period, Henry VIII also embarked on ambitious projects to enhance England's prestige abroad. He invested in the navy, strengthened the military, and engaged in diplomacy with European powers. These moves were designed to assert England's influence and reflect the Tudor king's desire to be seen as a formidable leader on the continental stage. Henry VIII's reign was marked by a combination of personal ambition, political strategy, and public spectacle. His actions were as much about demonstrating his authority and brilliance as they were about achieving tangible results. Yet, the personal and political were always intertwined. Henry VIII's marriages, courtly intrigue, and pursuit of a male heir had direct implications for his foreign policy and domestic governance. The creation of the Church of England allowed him to consolidate power, control religious doctrine, and secure the annulment he needed to marry Anne Boleyn. Every decision, every marriage, and every scandal reflected the unique way in which Henry VIII's personal desires shaped the destiny of England. By the end of this segment, Henry VIII had established a pattern that would define his reign: bold action, personal ambition, and a willingness to upend tradition for his own purposes. His pursuit of Anne Boleyn, the creation of the Church of England, and the relentless quest for a male heir illustrate how deeply personal motivations could intersect with politics and religion in Tudor England. The court buzzed with intrigue, alliances shifted rapidly, and the king's personality dominated every aspect of governance. Henry VIII, the Tudor king, had become a figure larger than life, capable of inspiring admiration, fear, and fascination in equal measure. Even after Boleyn's execution, the consequences of this period would echo throughout Henry VIII's reign. The Tudor king had set a precedent. Personal desire and political power were inseparable, and the pursuit of legacy could justify extraordinary actions. The creation of the Church of England, the manipulation of Parliament, and the courtly intrigues that surrounded his marriages all demonstrate the remarkable influence of Henry VIII's personal life on the structure of English governance. This period, with all its drama, scandal, and ambition, remains a testament to the unique, often unpredictable, and always compelling nature of Henry VIII's reign. And brilliance played out, shaping the destiny of England and leaving a legacy that continues to captivate historians, scholars, and audiences today. And the king's pursuit of a male heir had led to scandal, political upheaval, and even execution. But Henry VIII was nothing if not persistent. The Tudor dynasty could not survive without a male successor, and the king was determined that his legacy would continue. His court, still buzzing from the shocking events surrounding Anne Boleyn, now awaited his next move. Who would be his next queen? How would this marriage shape England, religion, and the very fabric of the Tudor reign? The answer, of course, was Jane Seymour, a woman whose story is inseparable from Henry VIII's obsession with a male heir. Jane Seymour was nothing like the audacious Anne Boleyn. She was quiet, demure, and obedient, qualities that seemed to appeal perfectly to Henry VIII at this stage in his life. After Anne's execution, the king's court was rife with gossip and speculation. Advisors watched carefully, trying to anticipate who would capture the king's attention next. Jane's calm demeanor, gentle beauty, and apparent submissiveness made her the ideal candidate to soothe the king who had just endured a period of emotional turbulence. Henry VIII, the Tudor king, was drawn not just to her physical presence, but to the promise of stability, domestic harmony, and, most importantly, the hope of a male heir who would secure the Tudor dynasty. In 1536, Henry VIII married Jane Seymour, and this union would have the long-awaited result he so desperately desired. Jane gave birth to Edward, the future Edward VI, in 1537. Finally, the king had a son. The Tudor dynasty seemed secure, and Henry VIII could, at least for a moment, celebrate a personal and political victory. But even this seemingly happy event was tempered by tragedy. Jane Seymour died shortly after childbirth, leaving Henry VIII devastated. It is said that she was the only one of his 6 wives for whom he truly mourned. Her death, however, did not slow the king's relentless pursuit of legacy, power, and influence. The Tudor king was already looking ahead, planning his next moves both politically and matrimonially. Henry VIII's pattern of marriage, obsession with heirs, and political ambition continued to dominate his reign. His personal desires were inseparable from his public decisions, and every marriage had profound implications for England's governance, religion, and international relations. Following Jane Seymour's death, Henry VIII once again sought a queen who could provide companionship, political alliances, or, ideally, both. The king's 4th marriage would be to Anne of Cleves, a German princess whose union was arranged for diplomatic purposes. Henry VIII, the Tudor king, was now older, heavier, and more imposing than ever, but he still had the energy, ambition, and determination that had defined his reign. The marriage to Anne of Cleves in 1540 is often remembered for its comedic elements, at least from a modern perspective. Henry VIII, upon meeting Anne, reportedly found her unattractive and was disappointed by her appearance, famously referring to her as a Flanders mare. Despite the political intent behind the marriage, the union was short-lived, lasting only 6 months before it was annulled. And remained in England, illustrating Henry VIII's complex personality, ruthless when necessary, yet capable of generosity and political calculation. Following the failed marriage with and of Cleves, Henry VIII turned his attention to Catherine Howard, a young cousin of Anne Boleyn. Catherine Howard was vivacious, charming, and much younger than the king, which initially delighted Henry VIII. This fifth marriage, however, would end in tragedy once again. Catherine's infidelity and reckless behavior led to her execution in 1542, marking the second time Henry VIII executed a queen. The Tudor king's court was once again thrown into turmoil, as advisors and courtiers navigated the danger and intrigue surrounding the king's personal life. Henry VIII's reign demonstrated that personal passion could not be separated from political stability. The lives of queens and courtiers were often directly affected by the king's desires and moods. Finally, Henry VIII married Catherine Parr in 1543, a woman older, intelligent, and politically savvy enough to survive the king's temper and the dangers of court life. Catherine Parr acted as a stabilizing influence during the final years of Henry VIII's reign. She helped reconcile Henry with his daughters from previous marriages, promoted education and religious reform, and managed to navigate the treacherous waters of Tudor politics with remarkable skill. The marriage illustrates Henry VIII's recognition of the value of intelligence and diplomacy, as well as his desire for a companion who could manage the complexities of a court rife with intrigue, scandal, and political maneuvering. Throughout all these marriages, Henry VIII remained obsessed with securing the Tudor dynasty. The king's personal desires, his pursuit of love, lust, and legacy, were inseparable from his public policies and political decisions. Each union had direct consequences for religion, foreign policy, and governance. The creation of the Church of England, initially motivated by the need to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, had cascading effects that touched every aspect of English society. It is remarkable to consider how the personal ambitions of a single man could reshape an entire nation and alter the course of history. Henry VIII's reign also demonstrates the interplay between personal ambition and national politics. His pursuit of a male heir dictated not only his marriages, but also alliances, wars, and religious reforms. The Tudor king's decisions affected Parliament, advisors, foreign monarchs, and even the everyday lives of English citizens. The court was a microcosm of these tensions, filled with intrigue, ambition, and danger. Advisors who misjudged the king's desires risked disgrace or execution, while those who understood and navigated the king's complex personality could thrive. Henry VIII's life is a study in the inseparability of personal and political power, illustrating how one man's obsessions and ambitions can define an era. The legacy of Henry VIII's marriages is profound. Each queen, each union, and each scandal contributed to the shaping of England's monarchy, religious institutions, and political landscape. His 6 wives were not just personal companions. They were central figures in the ongoing drama of the Tudor dynasty, with their lives and fates deeply entwined with the king's ambitions. The stories of Anne Boleyn, Jane Seymour, and of Cleves, Catherine Howard, and Catherine Parr continue to fascinate historians and audiences alike, offering insights into the complexities of power, love, and legacy in Tudor England. Even as Henry VIII aged, his personality and ambitions remained as potent as ever. He had become a larger-than-life figure, a man of immense energy, appetite, and intellect, capable of brilliance and brutality, charm and terror. His obsession with securing the Tudor dynasty, controlling religion, and managing a court filled with intrigue ensured that every aspect of his reign was dramatic and consequential. The personal and political were never separate. Every decision reflected the king's desires, fears, and ambitions. Henry VIII, the Tudor king, remained a force of nature, shaping the destiny of England through marriages, reforms, and the sheer power of his personality. In these middle years of his reign, the pattern is clear. Henry VIII's obsession with heirs, coupled with his relentless pursuit of power, created a court rife with drama, intrigue, and danger. His marriages, each unique, each consequential, demonstrate the inseparability of personal desire and political authority. The creation of the Church of England, the execution of queens, and the careful management of alliances reflect a monarch whose personal ambitions dictated the fate of a nation. Henry VIII's life, full of passion, ambition, and drama, provides a vivid illustration of how one man can alter the course of history, leaving a legacy that remains compelling, controversial, and endlessly fascinating. The story of Henry VIII is not just the story of a king and his 6 wives. It is the story of a nation transformed by ambition, obsession, and the relentless drive of a man who refused to accept anything less than absolute authority. From the quiet intelligence of Jane Seymour to the tragic folly of Catherine Howard, each chapter of Henry VIII's marital saga reflects the unique interplay between personal desire and public power. The Tudor king's reign reshaped England politically, religiously, and culturally, leaving a mark that historians and enthusiasts continue to explore centuries later. As we conclude this segment, it is clear that Henry VIII's reign was defined by personal ambition intertwined with national destiny. His marriages, executed with a combination of strategy and passion, his religious reforms, and his management of a court filled with intrigue all illustrate the extraordinary complexity of his rule. Henry VIII, the Tudor king, remains an enduring figure in history, whose life and reign offer lessons in power, passion, and the sometimes unpredictable consequences of human desire. The pursuit of a male heir, the creation of the Church of England, and the series of marriages that defined his reign all serve as a reminder that history is often shaped by individuals, their ambitions, and the relentless pursuit of legacy. As Henry VIII moved into the later years of his reign, the Tudor king had transformed England in ways that would echo for centuries. His personal ambitions, particularly the relentless pursuit of a male heir, were inseparable from his political maneuvers, religious reforms, and cultural influence. By now, Henry VIII, the Tudor king, had already executed 2 of his 6 wives, broken away from the Roman Catholic Church, and established the Church of England. These dramatic actions had not only reshaped the religious landscape, but also cemented his reputation as one of history's most formidable and unpredictable monarchs. Yet, for all his ruthlessness, Henry VIII was also deeply aware of his legacy. The Tudor dynasty, in his eyes, depended not only on heirs but on the perception of power, stability, and grandeur that he cultivated throughout the kingdom. One of the defining aspects of Henry VIII's later reign was his consolidation of power. The creation of the Church of England allowed him to control religious doctrine, appoint loyal bishops, and ensure that the king's authority was unquestioned. This separation from Rome was more than a personal victory. It was a political revolution. Henry VIII used this newfound authority to impose religious, social, and legal changes that strengthened his control over England. Monasteries were dissolved, lands were seized, and the wealth that flowed from these actions enriched the crown while weakening potential opposition. The Tudor king was demonstrating, in very concrete ways, how personal ambition could drive national transformation. Henry VIII's court during these later years was a spectacle of power, intrigue, and cultural development. The king, though aging and heavier than in his youth, remained a dominant presence, capable of inspiring awe and fear simultaneously. Advisors, courtiers, and foreign diplomats all had to navigate his temper, charm, and unpredictability. The king's personality influenced every decision, and the stakes were high. A misstep could result in disgrace or even execution. This environment of constant tension, rivalry, and political maneuvering defined the Tudor court, making it one of the most fascinating and dangerous centers of power in European history. Alongside the political and religious changes, Henry VIII also focused on the visual and cultural presentation of the monarchy. He invested in lavish palaces, elaborate court ceremonies, and public spectacles that showcased his authority and reinforced his image as a powerful Tudor king. Portraits of the king, often larger than life, emphasized his physical presence, his fashion, and his grandeur. These efforts were not merely vanity. They were strategic tools for maintaining loyalty, respect, and awe among his subjects. In a time before modern media, spectacle was power, and Henry VIII mastered the art of using public imagery to enhance his authority. Henry VIII's domestic policies also reflected his obsession with legacy and control. He restructured the legal system, strengthened the central government, and ensured that parliament, courts, and bureaucratic institutions were firmly aligned with the crown. These reforms were often pragmatic responses to the challenges of ruling a kingdom still recovering from civil wars and religious upheaval. Yet they were also extensions of the king's personality, decisive, commanding, and occasionally ruthless. The Tudor dynasty depended on these reforms to secure stability, and Henry VIII understood that effective governance required both fear and admiration. Despite his authority, the king's personal life continued to dominate the court. His marriages, relationships, and quest for heirs remained central to England's political narrative. Jane Seymour's son, Edward, provided a male heir, but his health was fragile, and Henry's ongoing search for a stable dynasty continued to influence court dynamics. Catherine Parr, his final wife, acted as a stabilizing influence, guiding the king through domestic affairs while managing tensions among the nobility. Her intelligence and diplomacy helped maintain order in a court that was still full of intrigue, suspicion, and political maneuvering. Henry VIII's reliance on capable advisors and consorts illustrates the complex interplay between personal relationships and political authority in Tudor England. Henry VIII's foreign policy during these later years was similarly shaped by both ambition and pragmatism. He sought to assert England's influence in Europe while balancing the threats posed by France, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire. Military campaigns, alliances, and diplomatic marriages were all tools in his strategy to secure England's position on the continental stage. The Tudor king's foreign policy, like his domestic reforms, reflected a combination of personal ambition, national interest, and a desire for a lasting legacy. Every alliance and military decision was filtered through the lens of Henry VIII's personality, bold, calculating, and occasionally impulsive. Cultural developments during Henry VIII's reign also reveal the king's influence beyond politics and religion. Music, art, literature, and architecture flourished under his patronage. Henry VIII was a musician and composer himself, and he understood the importance of culture as a marker of prestige and power. Court musicians, poets, and artists thrived under royal patronage, creating works that reflected the grandeur and authority of the Tudor monarchy. These cultural achievements were part of the king's broader strategy to solidify his legacy, ensuring that England would be remembered not only for its political and religious transformations, but also for its contributions to the arts and humanist learning. Henry VIII's later reign also saw the continuing impact of his ruthless tendencies. The king was not above eliminating rivals, silencing critics, and enforcing obedience through intimidation. Advisors and courtiers were constantly aware of the risks of falling out of favor. Executions, imprisonments, and forced confessions were tools used to maintain control and ensure compliance. Yet, these measures were tempered by Henry's intelligence and strategic thinking. He balanced fear with charisma, brutality with charm, and ambition with practical governance. The result was a court that was dynamic, dangerous, and endlessly fascinating, a reflection of the king himself. The legacy of Henry VIII's later years is profound. The Tudor king reshaped England politically, religiously, and culturally, leaving an indelible mark on the nation. His personal ambitions, particularly the pursuit of a male heir, drove political reform, religious transformation, and domestic policy. The creation of the Church of England, the consolidation of royal authority, and the patronage of arts and culture all illustrate how one individual's desires and vision can influence the course of history. Henry VIII's reign demonstrates that personal ambition and national destiny are often inseparable, and that the actions of a single monarch can define the fate of a nation for generations. Even in his later years, Henry VIII remained a compelling figure. He was intelligent, charismatic, and occasionally ruthless. He had reshaped the monarchy, transformed religion, and influenced culture, all while navigating personal passion, ambition, and the pressures of legacy. The Tudor king's story illustrates the complexity of human motivation and the power of individual agency. Henry VIII's life and reign continue to captivate historians, scholars, and enthusiasts, offering lessons in governance, ambition, and the sometimes unpredictable consequences of human desire. As we reflect on this phase of his reign, it is clear that Henry VIII's influence extended far beyond the palace walls. His political, religious, and cultural decisions shaped the lives of ordinary citizens, the fortunes of the nobility, and the course of European diplomacy. The Tudor king's personal ambitions were inseparable from his public authority, creating a reign that was dynamic, dramatic, and transformative. Every marriage, every religious reform, every cultural patronage initiative contributed to the enduring legacy of Henry VIII, ensuring that the Tudor dynasty would be remembered not only for its rulers, but for the profound impact of one king's vision and determination. In conclusion, the later years of Henry VIII's reign illustrate the full scope of his impact as a Tudor king. His consolidation of power, religious reforms, courtly intrigue, cultural patronage, and relentless pursuit of a male heir demonstrate a ruler whose personal ambitions were inseparable from the destiny of his nation. The Tudor dynasty, shaped by marriage, policy, and charisma, benefited from a king whose intelligence, ruthlessness, and vision transformed England politically, religiously, and culturally. Henry VIII, the Tudor king, remains one of history's most fascinating figures, a man whose reign continues to captivate audiences and influence historical scholarship. As Henry VIII entered the final years of his reign, the once vigorous Tudor king began to feel the weight of age, illness, and the relentless demands of monarchy. The man who had stormed through Europe with charisma, ambition, and ruthless determination was now slower, heavier, and more burdened by the consequences of his own choices. Yet, even in decline, Henry VIII remained a figure of extraordinary influence, shaping England politically, religiously, and culturally until his death. His later years reveal the complexities of a ruler whose personal ambitions, desires, and obsessions were inseparable from the fate of the nation he governed. Henry VIII's health had begun to deteriorate due to obesity, leg ulcers, and other ailments that would plague him for the rest of his life. These physical challenges, however, did little to diminish his authority or his drive. Even from his palace chambers, the Tudor king continued to exert control over the court, parliament, and the Church of England. Advisors and courtiers, aware of his declining health, moved carefully, balancing respect for his power with awareness of the king's temper and impulsive decisions. Henry VIII, the Tudor king, had always been a man who fused personal desire with political action, and his later years were no exception. Despite physical limitations, he remained central to the governance of the nation, illustrating how personal presence and authority can shape political institutions. The final years of Henry VIII VIII's reign also emphasized the ongoing importance of securing the Tudor dynasty. Edward VI, the long-awaited male heir born to Jane Seymour, had survived infancy, but his youth and fragile health made him vulnerable. Henry VIII knew that the stability of the Tudor line depended on careful planning, legal reforms, and the management of powerful nobles who might challenge or manipulate succession. In response, the king strengthened the role of Parliament and codified legal instruments to ensure that Edward's succession would be recognized. These measures reflected Henry VIII's understanding that political stability was intertwined with personal legacy. The Tudor king's obsession with heirs, evident from the beginning of his reign, remained a central concern until the end of his life. Religion, too, continued to play a defining role in Henry VIII's later years. The creation of the Church of England, originally a personal solution to the problem of marriage and succession, had evolved into a cornerstone of national identity. Henry VIII used his position as supreme head of the church to enforce doctrine, control the clergy, and manage religious practice across England. Monasteries, dissolved decades earlier, had been replaced with a system that concentrated power and wealth in the hands of the crown. Religious reform, once driven by personal desire, had become a permanent feature of governance, demonstrating how individual ambition can catalyze long-lasting societal change. The Tudor king's religious policies influenced not only politics, but also culture, law, and education, ensuring that his legacy would endure through generations. Henry VIII's court in these later years was a delicate balancing act. Advisors, nobles, and courtiers had to navigate the king's moods, preferences, and increasingly capricious behavior. Personal relationships remained critical. Loyalty, intelligence, and tact were valued above all else. The king's wives, particularly Catherine Parr, played important roles in maintaining courtly stability. Catherine Parr, intelligent, politically aware, and capable of managing the king's temper, acted as a stabilizing influence. She reconciled Henry with his daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, ensuring their inclusion in the Tudor succession and fostering a sense of continuity in the monarchy. Her influence highlights how personal relationships in Tudor England could shape political outcomes and the fate of a dynasty. Henry VIII's foreign policy during these final years continued to reflect a combination of ambition, pragmatism, and personal desire for prestige. The king sought to assert England's influence abroad while balancing threats from France, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire. Military campaigns were carefully calibrated, alliances negotiated with care, and diplomatic marriages arranged to serve both domestic and international objectives. Even as his health declined, Henry VIII remained deeply engaged in these affairs, demonstrating the enduring link between personal drive and national governance. The Tudor king's later reign reminds us that a monarch's ambitions can have profound and lasting effects on a country's position in the broader European landscape. Culturally, Henry VIII continued to be a patron of the arts, music, and education. The king himself was a talented musician and composer, and he encouraged artistic and intellectual development throughout the court. This period saw the flourishing of English Renaissance culture, in part fueled by the Tudor king's tastes and ambitions. Lavish ceremonies, grand architecture, and artistic commissions were all reflections of Henry VIII's desire to leave a visible, lasting legacy. The connection between personal vision and cultural achievement is clear. The Tudor king's ambitions shaped not only politics and religion, but also the aesthetic and intellectual life of the nation. Henry VIII's later years were also marked by the consequences of his earlier ruthlessness. Executions, imprisonments, and forced confessions had created a court culture of caution and fear, but also of ambition and opportunity. Those who understood the king's moods and intentions could thrive. Those who misjudged him often suffered dire consequences. The Tudor king's ability to blend charm, intimidation, and intelligence ensured that he remained the central authority in England, demonstrating that even in decline, a powerful personality can dominate institutions and shape history. As death approached, Henry VIII became increasingly reflective on the stability and legacy of the Tudor dynasty. He codified succession laws, secured alliances, and ensured that his children would inherit the throne according to his wishes. Edward VI, though still a child, was recognized as heir, while Mary and Elizabeth were included in the line of succession, albeit with limitations reflecting the complex religious and political landscape Henry had created. The king's concern with legacy demonstrates how personal ambition can drive both immediate political decisions and long-term national planning. Henry VIII's life, marked by ambition, passion, and complexity, offers a vivid illustration of how personal desires intersect with political authority. His 6 marriages, creation of the Church of England, courtly intrigue, cultural patronage, and legal reforms were all driven by a combination of personal need, ambition, and strategic thinking. The Tudor king's obsession with a male heir, his ruthlessness in governance, and his vision for England ensured that his reign would be transformative. The consequences of his actions, religious reform, political centralization, and cultural development, continued to shape the nation long after his death. By the time Henry VIII died in 1547, England had been irrevocably transformed. The Tudor king's reign had seen extraordinary changes in governance, religion, culture, and society. His personal ambitions, particularly the pursuit of a male heir, had reshaped institutions and created lasting legacies. The creation of the Church of England, the execution of rivals and wives, and the establishment of a strong monarchy illustrate how individual desires and decisions can leave a permanent mark on a nation. Henry VIII, the Tudor king, remains a figure whose life continues to captivate, inspire, and fascinate, offering lessons in power, ambition, and the consequences of personal desire on the course of history. Even centuries later, Henry VIII's influence remains visible. The institutions he reformed, the religious structures he created, and the cultural achievements he fostered continue to impact England and the wider world. The story of Henry VIII is one of ambition, determination, and a relentless drive to shape his legacy. It is a story of a man whose personal desires were inseparable from the fate of a nation, demonstrating the enduring power of individual agency in shaping history. In conclusion, the final years of Henry VIII's reign illustrate a monarch fully aware of his mortality and determined to secure the Tudor dynasty. His health, declining though it was, did not diminish his authority, ambition, or influence. The Tudor king's personal, political, and religious decisions remained tightly intertwined, reflecting the inseparability of ambition and legacy. Henry VIII's reign offers a remarkable case study of how one man's vision, personality, and determination can transform a nation politically, religiously, and culturally, leaving an enduring legacy that continues to captivate historians and audiences today. By the time Henry VIII passed away in 1547, the Tudor king had left an indelible mark on England. His reign, full of drama, scandal, and transformation, had redefined monarchy, religion, and culture. The man who began his rule as a young, charming, athletic prince ended it as a larger-than-life monarch whose legacy would be debated for centuries. Henry VIII's life demonstrates the extraordinary interplay between personal desire, political power, and national destiny. His 6 marriages, obsession with securing a male heir, creation of the Church of England, and political reforms all contributed to shaping the Tudor dynasty and the future of England in ways that few rulers could match. One of the most defining aspects of Henry VIII's reign was the centrality of personal ambition in governance. From the beginning, the king's desire for a male heir drove decisions that would have lasting consequences. His marriage to Catherine of Aragon, initially a political alliance, became a source of conflict when she failed to produce a son. His obsession with Anne Boleyn led to the English Reformation and the creation of the Church of England, fundamentally altering the religious and political landscape of England. Henry VIII's pursuit of heirs was more than a private concern. It dictated policy, influenced foreign relations, and reshaped the nation's institutions. The Tudor king's personal desires and national duties were inseparable, highlighting the unique relationship between monarchy and legacy. The 6 wives of Henry VIII each played crucial roles in the narrative of his reign. Catherine of Aragon, the loyal and devout first queen, represented political stability and traditional Catholic values. Anne Boleyn's ambition, intelligence, and charm catalyzed religious revolution and court intrigue. Jane Seymour provided the long-awaited male heir, Edward VI, solidifying the Tudor dynasty. And of Cleves, whose marriage was arranged for diplomacy, demonstrated the king's pragmatism and capacity for humor. Catherine Howard's tragic downfall revealed the dangers of courtly ambition and personal indiscretion, while Catherine Parr, the intelligent and politically astute final wife, helped stabilize the court and safeguard the succession. Together, these women were not merely companions or consorts. They were central actors in the drama of Tudor politics, religion, and legacy. Henry VIII's reign also saw remarkable political and religious reforms. The creation of the Church of England not only allowed him to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, but also placed the king at the head of religious authority in England. This consolidation of power allowed Henry VIII to control the clergy, dissolve monasteries, and seize wealth that would strengthen the crown. These reforms reshaped English society, altered governance structures, and left a legacy that would endure through the Reformation and beyond. The Tudor king's political acumen was matched by his ability to harness personal ambition in the service of national transformation, demonstrating that individual agency can profoundly influence the course of history. Beyond religion and politics, Henry VIII's influence extended to culture, education, and the arts. The king was a patron of music, literature, and visual arts, and he himself composed music, reflecting the Renaissance influence of his time. Courtly ceremonies, architecture, and artistic commissions were designed to project power, prestige, and sophistication. These cultural investments not only reinforced Henry VIII's authority, but also contributed to the broader intellectual and artistic development of England. In this sense, the Tudor king's reign was as much about shaping perception and legacy as it was about governance and policy. His personal tastes and ambitions left a lasting mark on the cultural landscape of the nation. The controversies of Henry VIII's reign, however, cannot be overlooked. Executions, imprisonments, and ruthless political maneuvering characterized the court, and the king's decisions often generated fear alongside admiration. Yet these controversies were intertwined with his vision for England. Whether it was the execution of Anne Boleyn, the dissolution of the monasteries, or the enforcement of religious conformity, Henry VIII's actions reflected a consistent pattern: personal ambition driving public policy. The Tudor king's willingness to challenge tradition, confront powerful institutions, and assert his authority reshaped the monarchy and set precedents for future rulers. Henry VIII's legacy is also defined by the dynasty he secured. Edward VI, Mary I, and Elizabeth I would each inherit the complex political and religious structures established by their father. The Tudor dynasty, strengthened by the careful management of succession and the centralization of royal authority, owed much to Henry VIII's relentless drive. His obsession with a male heir, combined with strategic political reforms, ensured that the monarchy would endure despite the turbulence of the Reformation and the challenges of European politics. The Tudor king's personal desires and national ambitions were inseparable, demonstrating how one individual can shape the course of a nation. Historians continue to debate Henry VIII's reign, weighing his brilliance against his ruthlessness, his charm against his tyranny, and his ambition against the consequences of his actions. Some view him as a visionary reformer who strengthened England's monarchy and independence, while others emphasize the cruelty, scandal, and personal obsession that marked his life. Yet, even in criticism, there is acknowledgement of the king's extraordinary ability to intertwine personal desires with political authority, leaving a legacy that continues to captivate scholars, students, and the public alike. The story of Henry VIII remains one of power, passion, and transformation, offering lessons in leadership, ambition, and the unpredictable consequences of human desire. In reflecting on the entirety of Henry VIII's reign, several patterns emerge. Personal ambition, particularly the pursuit of a male heir, consistently influenced political, religious, and social decisions. Marriages were not merely personal relationships, but instruments of statecraft, diplomacy, and succession planning. Religious reform was often motivated by personal needs, yet reshaped the nation in enduring ways. The Tudor king's court was a microcosm of these dynamics, blending fear, loyalty, intrigue, and ambition. Henry VIII's life illustrates how personal desires can drive institutional change, influence culture, and shape national identity. The final years of Henry VIII's reign also underscore the human dimensions of leadership. Despite immense power, the king faced mortality, illness, and the pressures of legacy. His health declined, yet his authority remained largely unquestioned. Advisors and courtiers had to navigate his moods, preferences, and temper, balancing caution with ambition. Even in decline, Henry VIII's presence dominated political, religious, and cultural life, illustrating the enduring impact of individual leadership on the course of history. The Tudor king's ability to command authority, inspire loyalty, and enforce policy even in his later years speaks to the extraordinary interplay between personality and governance. Ultimately, Henry VIII's reign is a study in the inseparability of personal desire and political authority. The king's obsession with securing a male heir, his marriages, his creation of the Church of England, and his reforms in governance all demonstrate how individual ambition can shape national destiny. The Tudor dynasty, strengthened by these efforts, endured long after Henry VIII's death, with his children continuing to navigate the complex political, religious, and cultural landscape he left behind. The king's legacy is multifaceted. He was a reformer, a ruler, a patron of culture, a tyrant, and a man whose personal passions and ambitions left an indelible mark on history. Even centuries later, the story of Henry VIII continues to captivate audiences. His 6 wives, his political and religious innovations, and his larger-than-life personality remain central to historical study, popular culture, and public fascination. The Tudor king's life demonstrates that leadership is often an intricate combination of personal desire, political strategy, and cultural vision. Henry VIII, the Tudor king, exemplifies how individual ambition, charisma, and decision-making can transform a nation, leaving a legacy that endures far beyond a single lifetime. In conclusion, Henry VIII's reign was a transformative period in English history. His personal ambition, political reforms, religious revolution, and cultural patronage reshaped the Tudor dynasty, strengthened the monarchy, and altered the course of the nation. The pursuit of a male heir, the 6 marriages, the creation of the Church of England, and the management of courtly intrigue demonstrate how personal desire and public authority can intertwine to produce lasting historical impact. Henry VIII, the Tudor king, remains one of history's most compelling figures, whose life and reign continue to fascinate, instruct, and inspire generations. The story of his reign is a reminder of the profound influence that one determined individual can have on a nation, its institutions, and its culture.